Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine put together here by the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. We get together all over the Commonwealth, and we have our Tuesday morning group coalition meetings. As a matter of fact, the next one is coming up this Tuesday. Find out more about us at our website, virginiainstitute.org. Policy decisions, legislation, and advocacy all over the place. Our first guest this week has got a great new book out. I would love to tell you that I've read it all the way, but we have a more of like above-board relationship. So I'm just going to tell you I've only been able to read some of it, but it's a terrific read. Kennerly Davis, former assistant attorney, deputy attorney general for the Commonwealth of Virginia, but a terrific author. Maybe he missed his calling. The book is called Revolution, a call to turn back the lawless left and restore the promise of America. Kennerly, welcome to the program. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine, Joe, and very glad to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today and all your listeners.
Well, let's jump in. In your opening chapter is the big lie, and I've always kind of, as a commentator, and believe me, I feel like I'm fighting with the fire hose every day, as the stories seem to come faster and faster and faster in some sort of Cloward and Piven fever dream. Is it one big lie, or is it one big lie that's been broken into a million little lies that make it harder for us to catch?
Well, I think it's actually both. I mean, you're quite right. It is like dealing with a fire hose, an endless stream every day of deceptive, distorted narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But the central driving force behind it, the big lie, the core deception, is the attempt by the left to redefine America as a systemically racist society. Now and from the beginning, a nation founded by racists to perpetuate racism and run by racists ever since. And that is their basic narrative, and they do that for several reasons. First, to divide us, but even more importantly, to cut us off from the real narrative of America, the real truth, the real story. And that is a story of a nation, an exceptional, historically exceptional nation, founded on the unifying and uplifting principles set forth in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We are one people.
Mm-hmm.
We are alike, all of us alike in the only ways that matter. We are people who participate as individuals in a great nation, but we share a common sacred humanity, and we are all possessing of unalienable rights that come from the hand of God and not from the generosity of government. And those rights must be respected and protected by the government that we founded for that purpose. That's the story.
Mm-hmm.
America has the most powerful narrative in the history of nations. And, of course, he who controls the narrative controls the outcome of the discussion. And so they are desperately trying to change the narrative and substitute one of irredeemable systemic evil, which, if it were true, would remove any moral basis to support the continued existence of the country. You know, they throw the term around all the time, systemic racism, as a problem that we need to face. But by their own logic, if we're a systemically racist country in 2021, we always have been. And if we always have been, there is no justification to support the continued existence of the United States. And that's the revolutionary core of their dangerous, divisive, destructive narrative. And so what do? We push back. We all got to push back with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wrote the book, is to, in a short, accessible book, give people who are like you and me and so many other patriots deeply concerned about the direction of the country, and give them some facts and background materials to help them push back and understand really what's going on and what they can do in their daily lives to begin to push back and resist the lies that are, as you say, coming forth from the so-called establishment, so-called elite, so-called progressive institutions that dominate so much of our daily lives.
Well, let me follow up on that, because I've been told by people that, and know far more about it than I have, and analyze it more, that this really takes, the core principle of Marxism, which is built on class warfare. And since they couldn't really make that work in the United States, they had to wrap it in race warfare. But the tactic is still the same, that there's a group of people that have all of everything and you don't, and you have to get it from them. Is this tactic because there are so many even modern examples of the abject devastation of a Marxist governing system in a country that they wouldn't dare say, oh, yeah, we're Marxists. No, they want to make it seem like we're doing something beneficial, pay no attention to the Venezuelans and the Zimbabwe's and the Southeast Asian communist countries while we look at it.
No, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. Critical race theory, much in the news today, and in some ways the news about that's getting better as parents in school systems across the country begin to wake up.
Oh, yeah.
And see what is being force-fed their children and start to push back, as we see recent stories in Loudoun County and Manhattan and elsewhere around the country. But critical race theory is just a part of a broader ideology or broader doctrine called critical theory. And it's all Marxist in its different forms. And what they mean, the academics and the left-wing radicals that developed this doctrine over the last several decades, is to try to turn away the traditional Marxist doctrine and propaganda, turn it away from a focus exclusively on race and make it broader and try to focus it on not class in the past, turn away from class, but focus it on other aspects of the social structure, such as prominently race. But it's the same Marxist theory as when they were focusing on class. That is, there are the oppressors and the oppressed, and if you're a member of the oppressor class, you are evil, irredeemably evil, and you need to be dealt with. Your property needs to be taken, your power needs to be neutralized, your institutions need to be taken down. And if you're oppressed, well, we, the people who are advancing these theories, we will take care of you. And that's the promise initially. But of course, they don't they won't help. They won't help Black Americans, people of color, any more than any Marxists anywhere have helped poor people anywhere. It's just a form of phony analysis that is put forth for the real purpose of undermining the legitimacy of existing political principles and institutions and tearing those down, and in the chaos that follows, erecting what they, back in the day, called the dictatorship of the proletariat, and what they will call, going forward, something here like the national regulatory body to advance equity.
Right. Oh, we hear equity all the time. Kennerly Davis, author of the new book. It's called Revolution, a call to turn back the lawless left and restore the promise of America. It's available. Get it, Amazon. And is there a best website for people, or should they just go to Amazon to get the book, Kennerly?
The best place to get it, Joe, is directly to Amazon.
Okay.
And if you put in Revolution and Kennerly Davis, it will pop up in Kindle form and paperback, at least the last time I checked. I haven't been canceled yet.
Good. No, it seemed like it last time. Every body now has and governing offices have, dictates and official bureaus of equity. And it's all about, is taking from those who have and giving to those who have not. And it's always come to the same sticky end, Kennerly, and that's what I feel like they're trying to hide, is the fact that there are countless examples of the body counts that go along with communism and redistributional wealth. Even Marx talks about the necessity of purging people who just won't go along with the idea.
Oh yeah, their record of failure is continuous, and the devastation, the loss of life, destruction of property, the foreclosure of any possibility for progress in civil order and civil peace. The record is an unmitigated, unending, unbroken catastrophe. And so they are constantly, as they strive for the same goal, which is the consolidation of unhindered power, they're constantly rebranding the details of their narrative and their particular slogans. And equity is, in fact, one of the sort of latest new and improved brands of Coca-Cola.
Yeah, exactly. The new slogan.
But it's the same thing, because equity, which of course is absolutely antithetical to traditional classical liberal concepts of equal treatment under the law and the rule of law, that is, equal treatment of each individual under the law. If you have a system like that, that embodies effectively the rule of law and manifests and runs itself in a way that ensures equal treatment of each individual according to the rules that have been established by the consent of the governed for society as a whole, if you have that, you're going to have unequal outcomes, because you have unequal distributions of skills, abilities, efforts,
Mm-hmm.
and opportunities. And of course, a free society will try to do every reasonable thing it can to equalize opportunities. And if you've had a group of people, certainly like blacks in this country and other poor people in this country, if you've had groups of society that have been shortchanged for one obvious, reasonable reason, reasonably apparent reason, have been shortchanged on their opportunities, then of course you adjust those and in a reasonable, common sense way. But you're always going to have unequal outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of good opportunities in my life, but there are many things that I have never attained and never will, and others will. But equity is entirely different. It's entirely antithetical.
Mm-hmm.
It is socialism, centrally planned socialism, communism by another name, their latest euphemism, because they always, until they have control in a society, they always try to advance as they know they must advance on cat's paws, softly,
Mm-hmm.
using reassuring and vague terms like recently inclusion and diversity and of course equity. But what they're talking about is group defined equal outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking at society, and if they see any disparity of existing material condition between favored and disfavored groups, they will, they say, on behalf of the disfavored groups, take any material assets or money or situations or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Until they are satisfied that with the resulting outcomes for the previously labeled disfavored class. But guess what? Two things happen. It never ends,
Right.
number one. And number two, what really happens, whether it's in Russia, East Europe, Venezuela, Cuba, China, North Korea, or what was the country for Winston Smith? Oceania.
Yeah, yes.
In 1984. It's all the same outcome, Joe, over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Well,
There ends up the people running this show in the name of redistribution themselves amass not only consolidated power, but whatever wealth has not been destroyed by their undertaking, they take it for themselves.
Ken, let me ask you this, and this, so Martin Luther King Jr. during the 60s and the civil rights movement, made great strides in the white community because all he said was live up to the words you wrote on paper. He didn't ask for anything more. The movement wasn't about asking for anything more, wasn't asking for payback. He just said, listen, this is what it says. Our rights are to be protected in the same way yours are. And was that insufficient? And was the worst thing that happened to the plight of the black American when Martin Luther King was assassinated?
That was a terrible blow. But even if he had not been assassinated, I think one reason that so-called critical race theory emerged from the left was in response to the success of the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act, and related legislation, and the economic developments that followed from that. The Marxists, of course, have been around for a long, long time, including in the 50s and mid 60s. But when I'll say the civil rights movement enjoyed significant successes, then, of course, the issue of racism, to the extent that the successes are achieved, the issue of racism obviously declines. It's mitigated, and so they had to adjust it. I mean, critical race theory emerged in the 70s and 80s. In fact, when I was in law school at Harvard, there were several Marxists on the faculty, so-called crits, and they looked at the legal system and the social and race situation in the country at the time, and came forth with critical legal theory and critical legal studies and critical race theory, but it was all part of the same thing. There's a Professor Derek Bell at Harvard at that time, and he is acknowledged as the sort of founding father of critical race theory, but there were several other crits on the faculty, and they were all saying the same thing. That is, look at society as a whole. Its institutions, its legal system, its regulatory system, its property system of property law, criminal law, its economic arrangements, its social customs, and all of it is nothing more, according to the crits, as an institutionalization of oppressive dominance by the existing ruling class. And so true liberty, true freedom will only come when people rise up against all the different institutions and take them down. And, of course, in the chaos that follows, we'll see the usual, if it ever comes to that, you would see the usual consolidation of authoritarian power.
Right, just to keep order. And thus we wind up, a little bit like Rome, a little bit like France after their revolutions. Kennerly Davis, thank you so much. The book is Revolution, a call to turn back the lawless left and restore the promise of America. It's more than just explaining it. There's a whole bit of toolkits and things you can apply to yourself every day. I appreciate my copy of it. I hope a lot of folks, maybe give them as a Father's Day gift, a founding Father's Day gift, if you would. But thank you so much.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea, Joe.
And have a wonderful weekend yourself, and thank you for joining us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Thank you, Joe. Take care.
Thank you, sir. And coming up next, Jim DeMint and a brand new book. It's actually a work of fiction. It's called Satan's Share on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.